Inside Texas death row transfers, the hidden world of inmate movement. When the gates of Texas's most secure prisons open in the middle of the night, few people know what's happening. No news cameras. No announcements. No paperwork made public until days later. Yet behind those gates, something crucial is unfolding: the transfer of men and women sentenced to die. Every move is a high-risk operation. Armed escorts. Sealed manifests. And, often, no one, not even the inmate's family, knows when or where it's happening until it's already done. This is Inside Texas Death Row Transfers, a factual deep dive into how America's largest death row system secretly moves its most dangerous prisoners across the state.
Before we dive into today's powerful story, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more gripping tales. Your support helps us keep sharing these stories, and we wouldn't want you to miss any of the action. Now, let's get started.
The geography of Texas death row. Texas operates one of the largest death row systems in the United States. As of 2025, more than 180 inmates remain under sentence of death, according to the Texas Department of Criminal Justice, TDCJ. But unlike the past, when death row inmates were housed in multiple prisons, today the system is concentrated in just one main location, the Allan B. Polunsky Unit, near Livingston, Texas. Polunsky is not a typical prison. It's a maximum security facility designed for complete isolation. Each condemned inmate is confined to a 60-square-foot single cell, 23 hours a day. Meals are delivered through a slot in the door. Inmates do not have televisions, and human contact is minimal. But despite this isolation, movement still happens: transfers to medical facilities, court hearings, appeals, or executions. And those transfers form one of the least understood elements of the Texas justice system. Historical context. Before 1999, death row prisoners were housed at the Ellis unit near Huntsville. But after a series of security breaches, including the 1998 escape of 7 inmates, the state relocated all condemned men to Polunsky, which offered tighter control and single-cell confinement. The transfer network. The Texas Department of Criminal Justice, TDCJ, runs one of the most extensive inmate transport systems in the nation, often referred to internally as the chain bus or Bluebird. It moves thousands of inmates every week between over 100 prison units, hospitals, and court jurisdictions. But when it comes to death row inmates, the procedures change entirely. Death row transfers are not part of the routine chain. They involve specialized staff from the Correctional Institutions Division Security Operations, officers trained for high-risk transport. Inmates are moved under separate manifests, typically during night or early morning hours to minimize risk. Each movement is planned days in advance, with notification going only to a small group: wardens, security captains, and TDCJ's regional command. The public and even other inmates are never informed. For security reasons, the vehicles are unmarked. Often plain white or gray vans with reinforced interiors. Officers are heavily armed, and a tactical escort follows the transport convoy, especially if it's heading to Huntsville, where Texas executions occur at the Walls Unit. A transfer may cover less than 50 miles, but the preparation can take up to 48 hours. Every possible route is mapped, with alternates ready in case of an emergency or media interference. From Polunsky to Huntsville, the final journey. When an execution date is finalized by the courts, an inmate's final transfer is scheduled. This journey, from Polunsky Unit to the Huntsville Walls Unit, is only about 40 miles, but it marks the final stage of the death penalty process in Texas. The transfer usually occurs on the morning of the scheduled execution. The condemned inmate is awakened early, strip-searched, and issued new clothing. He is then handcuffed, leg-shackled, and fitted with a belly chain. Before departure, he undergoes a medical check and a brief interview by correctional officers. Then, he is placed in a secure van with 3 armed officers, 1 driver, 1 front seat guard, and 1 in the rear. The trip takes roughly an hour. Upon arrival at the Walls Unit, the inmate is placed in a holding cell just 30 feet from the execution chamber, known as Death Watch. Here, the warden, chaplain, and witnesses are notified. During the final hours, the condemned may meet spiritual advisors or attorneys, eat a last meal, and write final statements. Every minute of this process is documented. Once the execution is complete, a body transport follows, coordinated with the county medical examiner's office or a designated funeral home. Other types of transfers. Not all movements are for executions. Some are due to medical reasons, court orders, or security reclassifications. Medical transfers. Inmates requiring specialized treatment are escorted to the University of Texas Medical Branch, UTMB, in Galveston or the John Seeley Hospital under maximum security. These transfers involve armored vehicles, constant restraints, and 24/7 guard presence. Court transfers. When an inmate is granted an appeal hearing or new sentencing phase, the transfer may be ordered to a county jail or courthouse. Such moves are coordinated with county sheriffs and Texas Rangers, depending on risk level. Emergency transfers. If there is a credible threat, such as gang conflict, medical collapse, or facility lockdown, TDCJ can authorize an emergency relocation within minutes. These are rare but happen several times a year. In each case, the procedures prioritize containment, secrecy, and control. For victims' families and the public, details emerge only through official records, sometimes weeks later. The human side of transfers. For inmates, transfers are moments of uncertainty. They mark rare breaks in monotony, a chance to glimpse the outside world, even if through tinted glass. Some former officers describe inmates remaining silent the entire ride. Others pray, hum quietly, or whisper final words to guards. Family members are often not informed in advance of transfers for security reasons. Many only learn about them after a call from the prison chaplain or attorney. Corrections officers describe the emotional complexity of these missions. One former Polunsky officer told the Texas Observer, "You can't let your feelings show. But when you're driving someone to die, it hits you later, not in the moment." Execution day operations. Once a death warrant is signed, every minute of the inmate's final day is mapped out in precise detail. At the Allan B. Polunsky Unit, this begins early in the morning, usually around 6 a.m. Correctional staff assemble in a secure conference room where the warden, assistant warden, and regional director review the execution order. A checklist is distributed that includes items like restraints, vehicle inspection, documentation, and communication codes. The condemned inmate, already on death watch, is informed that the transfer is imminent. He is permitted to shower, change into clean clothing, and collect any personal effects, a Bible, letters, or photographs. Medical personnel perform a basic health check, ensuring the inmate is physically stable enough for transport. Even at this stage, the inmate's exact transfer time remains confidential to everyone except command staff. Around 8 to 9 a.m., a small convoy leaves Polunsky under armed escort. The vehicle is accompanied by officers from the TDCJ's Correctional Emergency Response Team, CERT, trained in tactical transport and riot control. Upon arrival at the Walls Unit in Huntsville, the inmate is placed in a holding cell roughly 30 feet from the execution chamber. This space, known as the holding area, is under constant observation. The warden personally verifies the inmate's identity using fingerprint confirmation and ID documentation. Every action, from opening the van door to locking the holding cell, is recorded on body cameras and facility CCTV for audit purposes. The warden then notifies the Office of the Governor and Attorney General that the inmate has arrived. From that moment, the countdown begins. Female death row transfers. While most death row inmates in Texas are men held at Polunsky, women sentenced to death are housed at the Mountain View Unit in Gatesville, Texas. This facility is smaller, holding fewer than 10 female inmates on death row as of 2025. Transfers from Mountain View follow the same legal framework but differ operationally. The distance to Huntsville is about 120 miles, requiring longer escort times and more complex coordination. The female death row inmates are escorted by female officers, accompanied by armed male security personnel. Transport vehicles are similar, unmarked white vans with reinforced interiors, but equipped for longer travel with hydration supplies and medical kits. Historically, Texas has executed only 6 women since 1982, meaning these transfers are extremely rare. Each one receives close media scrutiny and detailed post-operation review. During these operations, the warden of Mountain View coordinates directly with the Huntsville regional director. At least 2 checkpoints along the route must be cleared by radio before the convoy proceeds. Upon arrival, the same identification and holding process occurs at the Walls unit. The inmate remains under continuous observation until execution or court intervention. Legal oversight and transparency. Despite being one of the most tightly controlled operations in the state, death row transfers have raised questions about transparency and oversight. The Texas Open Records Act allows limited access to non-confidential data, but the TDCJ routinely withholds specific details citing security risk. The public cannot access transfer schedules, routes, or staff names involved in executions. Families of inmates, meanwhile, are informed only after a transfer has been completed, usually through chaplain or attorney notification. Legal advocates have criticized this secrecy. In 2022, the Texas Civil Rights Project argued that limited transparency prevents accountability in cases of alleged mistreatment during transfer or pre-execution confinement. However, the TDCJ maintains that any release of such information could endanger staff and compromise security. In one statement to the Houston Chronicle, the agency explained, "Transfers involving capital cases are among the most sensitive operations conducted by the department. Security and safety take precedence over all other considerations. Internal audits by the Office of the Inspector General, OIG, periodically review transport logs to ensure compliance with state and federal regulations. No major breaches have been reported since 1999, though minor procedural violations, such as incomplete checklists or delayed notifications, occasionally appear in OIG reports." Historical case studies. Case 1, the 1998 Ellis Unit security breach. Before death row was centralized at Polunsky, the Ellis Unit near Huntsville held Texas's condemned inmates. In 1998, a group of inmates attempted an escape, exploiting flaws in the facility's group housing system. This event directly led to the relocation of death row operations to Polunsky in 1999. Case 2, Kenneth Foster, 2007. In an unusual case, inmate Kenneth Foster was transferred from Polunsky to Huntsville in preparation for execution, but hours before the scheduled time, his sentence was commuted by then-Governor Rick Perry. The convoy returned Foster to Polunsky the same night, marking one of the few documented return transfers in death row history. Case 3, Melissa Lucio, 2022. Lucio's transfer from Mountain View to Huntsville was halted following a last-minute stay issued by the Texas Court of Criminal Appeals. The convoy had not yet left the facility when the order arrived, preventing what would have been Texas's first female execution in over a decade. These incidents demonstrate how fragile and reactive the system can be, with legal, logistical, and ethical decisions converging at the final moment. Reform and controversy. Over the past decade, Texas's death row transfer system has faced growing calls for reform. Civil rights advocates, religious leaders, and former prison staff have questioned whether secrecy and extreme isolation serve any legitimate security purpose. In 2021, the Marshall Project and Texas Tribune jointly published an investigation revealing that some inmates spent years without outdoor recreation, violating international human rights standards. Transfers, they argued, were one of the few times inmates experienced natural light beyond their cells. Legislative efforts have been sporadic. In 2023, a bill proposing greater transparency in death row operations, including public reporting of transfer protocols, was introduced but failed to pass the Texas House Committee on Corrections. Former TDCJ Director Wayne Scott defended the system, stating in a 2020 interview, "It's not about punishment at that stage. It's about control. If one link fails, people die, staff or inmate." Still, journalists and human rights monitors continue to push for oversight mechanisms that balance security with accountability. The final hours. The last 24 hours of an inmate's life are a coordinated blend of bureaucracy and final human contact. Each transfer marks a series of irreversible steps. The warden informs the inmate of the official time. Attorneys are granted final access, and the chaplain stays nearby to provide last rites or spiritual guidance. Meals are offered, though Texas abolished the special last meal policy in 2011, after an inmate ordered a lavish spread and refused to eat it. Now, inmates receive the same food served to others in the facility. The van arrives under escort, doors secured, and the short journey to Huntsville begins. For most inmates, it's their first time outside Polunsky in years. Guards maintain radio silence during the trip. Inside, the atmosphere is heavy but professional, routine for the officers, monumental for the condemned. When the vehicle reaches the Walls unit, the gate closes behind them, locking out the world once again. The paperwork changes hands. And the countdown resumes. Post-execution procedures. Once the execution concludes at the Walls unit, the operation continues behind closed doors. Every step, from pronouncement of death to the transport of the body, follows a strictly codified routine laid out in the Texas Department of Criminal Justice's TDCJ Execution Procedures Manual. The attending physician verifies death by checking the inmate's vital signs. A time of death is formally recorded, and the warden signs the execution certificate. The body is then released to the county medical examiner or a pre-designated funeral home, depending on the inmate's wishes or family request. If no one claims the remains within 24 hours, they are transferred to the Texas State Cemetery in Huntsville, where unclaimed prisoners have been interred for decades. Media witnesses, spiritual advisors, and legal observers are escorted out under supervision. A short press statement, usually 2 paragraphs long, is issued by the TDCJ Public Information Office, confirming the execution, the crime of conviction, and the time of death. No details about the transport or personnel are released. The van used for the inmate's final journey is inspected, disinfected, and taken out of service for 48 hours before reuse. Officers involved in the execution are immediately debriefed and often provided mandatory counseling sessions with the unit staff psychologist. Family and victim coordination. Behind every transfer, 2 sets of families wait, those of the inmate and of the victim. Managing communication with both sides is one of the most sensitive duties within TDCJ. Victim notification officers contact registered next of kin approximately 30 days before an execution date. They confirm interest in attending the execution and arrange secure entry through a separate gate at the Walls unit. Victims' families are seated in a designated witness room behind glass, with counselors from the Victim Services Division on standby. For the inmates' relatives, contact is more restricted. They receive a single phone call from the prison chaplain confirming the scheduled transfer and are allowed one final visit, typically lasting 2 hours. These visits take place in non-contact booths separated by plexiglass. After the execution, both families may request counseling or debriefing through the Victim Services Division. However, records show that only a small fraction of families choose to engage with these programs, citing emotional exhaustion or distrust in the system. Media access and witness protocol. Media access to executions and death row transfers in Texas is extremely limited. Only a small pool of journalists, usually from outlets such as the Houston Chronicle, Associated Press, and Texas Tribune, are authorized to witness executions. For transfers, reporters have no direct access at all. They are notified only after the inmate arrives in Huntsville and placed under embargo until the execution is complete. On execution day, journalists must arrive hours in advance, pass multiple security screenings, and surrender all recording equipment. Inside the viewing area, they may take handwritten notes only. After the execution, they are escorted to a press room for a brief statement from the TDCJ spokesperson. Requests for additional transparency, such as footage of transport procedures or interviews with escorting officers, have been repeatedly denied. The agency argues that such exposure could endanger personnel or disrupt the dignity of the process. Psychological impact on officers. Correctional officers rarely speak publicly about their role in death row transfers, but interviews and psychological studies reveal the toll. A 2019 internal TDCJ survey found that more than 60% of staff involved in executions reported symptoms of chronic stress or insomnia within a year. Officers described the paradox of the job, ensuring safety and order while escorting someone to their death. One anonymous guard told the Marshall Project, "You tell yourself it's procedure, but you remember their face. You remember every mile of that drive." TDCJ offers post-incident counseling and peer support programs, but participation remains voluntary. Many officers avoid them out of fear of appearing weak or disloyal. Psychologists call this moral injury, the conflict between professional duty and personal ethics. In Texas, where executions are routine, this conflict becomes an unspoken burden carried by hundreds of staff across decades. Ethical debate around transfers. Critics argue that secrecy surrounding death row transfers conceals the human and financial costs of capital punishment. Each operation mobilizes dozens of staff, vehicles, and armed escorts, all at taxpayer expense. Supporters counter that the procedures are essential to prevent escape attempts or media interference, citing past incidents in other states where leaks led to security breaches. Ethicists question whether the extreme isolation of inmates and the ritualized secrecy of transfers align with evolving standards of human rights. The American Bar Association and the United Nations Human Rights Committee have both criticized U.S. states, including Texas, for dehumanizing practices in execution logistics. Nevertheless, Texas remains committed to its process. In a 2024 statement, TDCJ officials reiterated that safety, order, and lawful compliance will always override public curiosity. The debate continues in courtrooms, universities, and the media, a reflection of the moral complexity of a system designed to end lives under the strictest control imaginable. And that's the hidden world behind Texas death row transfers, a system built on precision, secrecy, and control. Every mile driven, every locked gate, every unseen decision tells a story, not just about punishment, but about power and procedure inside America's most active death penalty state. If you found this documentary informative, make sure to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell. We're uncovering more real stories from inside the world's most secure prisons every week. Stay curious, stay informed, and remember, justice doesn't end at the prison gate. Warning disclaimer. This documentary is entirely fact-based, drawn from verified sources including the Texas Department of Criminal Justice, court filings, and reputable news organizations such as the Texas Tribune, Houston Chronicle, and the Marshall Project.